and welcome to a new episode of Artist of the Week. My name is Keegan Gagnon and I'll be your host for this week's episode. We have with us, gracing us with his presence, Peter Raymond, an artist from the region. Hi Peter, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Very good. I'm very pleased that you're with us today. To start, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how did you start art, and what was your uprising?
My upbringing, I guess, I grew up in the West Island in the 60s and 70s. And, you know, I guess the West Island was the kind of place where, as you grew up, you wanted to get out of pretty quickly. And as a youngster, I was pretty good at art all the time. So I remember my grandfather saying, well, you know, you could be an artist. Because there was always this pressure of like, what are you going to be? And so going into school, I always liked the arts and wound up liking, you know, I was into music a little bit and theater, but then I think I'm a little bit more, I like to be a bit private. So painting is a little bit better for me because I can be alone in my studio and you know, let the world in when I want, and I don't really have to all the time.
Exactly.
So yeah, so when it came time to going to CIDI, I, you know, after a couple of at least 2 false starts, I wound up down in Champlain College in Lennoxville.
That's where I went.
And spent 1 year there. So I technically have never finished CIDI, but on the advice of one of the professors or one of the teachers there, I spent a year in Mexico, which was really, you know, like I kind of started being an artist. I count that CIDI experience at Champlain as being the start of my painting career, and but it really kind of took off in the sense that I really got into it in Mexico. I took art courses there. And had, you know, sculpture, painting, and drawing. But the teachers, the sculpture and drawing teachers were really happy to have a young artist, a young person who was interested in becoming an artist, because a lot of the people who went down there were kind of American tourists just taking a course. But these guys were, well, it was a man and his wife, and they were serious artists and knew a lot about what they were doing. So they took me under their wing, and I had a really good year.
Nice. And how did you live during that time?
Oh, well, it was fun time because you know, I went down, I had a bit of money, and of course Mexico, maybe it's the same now, but it was very inexpensive, and even just a little bit of Canadian money went a long way there, and so I got this this little I sublet a little place, you know, and the people who sublet it, you know, they weren't sure about who they were subletting it to, so it was a little bit of an interview process, and I guess they liked me because they let me keep let me keep the refrigerator and the 2 cats.
Ooh.
And you know, like big responsibility, you know, and the cats came in handy because the place also came with rats. So the cats were, you know, every now and then I'd come up and there'd be a big rat in the kitchen or something like that, and the cats would be looking pretty pretty proud of themselves. So, but you know, it was really fun painting and drawing and doing sculpture at the school, and I had a little studio there, and I, you know, created my first body of work in a way.
Yeah. Speaking of your body of work, we see behind you those beautiful landscapes, those aerial shots.
Yeah.
How do you define your art? What medium do you use? What kind of paints? A little bit more the detail of your work, if you.
Well, you know, when you're going to school, you're exposed to all sorts of different experiences. They want you to take courses in each of the mediums. And I was always in the back of my head, I always thought, okay, being an artist is being a painter. Now, you know, like being an artist could be, you could be a musician, you could be an actor, you could be a, you know, a theater director, you could be all sorts of things. But for me, like it was just, you know, an artist is a painter. And so I eventually kind of, you know, after taking courses in photography and printmaking and sculpture and painting and drawing, I gravitated towards painting. And I guess around 1988, I got a residency in Sweden. It's called the Bruceabo Prize, I guess. And I got to spend the summer on a little island, Gotland, in the middle of the Baltic. Really fantastic place. And when I got there, I was all ready to, you know, make art. And then I, you know, sort of set up in the studio that they provided, and I went, oh yeah, I have no idea what I want to do. It was just a complete blank. So I said, well, I'll just paint the surrounding landscape, you know, the Baltic, you know, Gotland, and so that was sort of, you know, by default, not really knowing what to paint. I decided on landscape, which is a very Canadian thing to do, I suppose, and it sort of stuck with that. It's not very fashionable, but you know.
I very much like the piece behind you that has a lot of blue and green, the cliffside.
Contrast.
Oh yeah, contrast is very nice. Yeah. Fantastic. Why? So you chose this type of art because you felt it was the most natural, but how did you come about doing the aerial shots, and how do you do those?
Well, that's, I suppose that it's a good question, because after a particular period of time of doing landscape and kind of repeating that, and I often do go back to the same sort of actual, you know, I work from pictures, so I could paint from the same picture, same photograph, you know, several paintings will come out of that. And I realized, okay, I'm just going over the same stuff. And after a while, I was getting a little bored. And so I thought, well, what can I do that's a little bit different? You know, going back to my school experience, you know, later after Mexico, I went to Mount Allison University in New Brunswick. And one of the, you know, the kind of currents of painting at the time that was sort of in vogue was called color field painting, and it was these big abstract paintings that, you know, big fields of color with smaller little bits of color to kind of activate the surface. You know, a lot of technical jargon, but I really liked it. It was you can think of Jack Bush as a Canadian example of that, I'm going to have a bit of a blank on different artists, but I sort of thought, well, maybe I'd like to go back and do something that's a bit more abstract. And the source of that, you know, also having, you know, spent a little bit of time on Google Earth, looking at places and being amazed by what you can see and the different patterns, and I sort of thought, well, maybe that would be a source of a picture. And you know, they turn out to be landscapes, except from just a different angle. So that's how that worked out. It was kind of a way of doing landscape, but they turn into abstract paintings.
And I think that leads us very well into our next question, which would be your process in creating those pieces. How do you start? What's your plan through your work, and how do you work? How long does an average piece take you, or would it vary very much depending on the piece?
Well, the way I work, as I said before, I work a lot from photographs, and of course the temptation with a photograph is to be photorealistic, and I don't, you know, I don't really want to do that. So I kind of throw in a few ways of working that kind of mean that I can't be too realistic. So when I do work a picture, I don't trace it, I don't project it or anything like that. And in a way, a photograph provides a huge amount of information. It's just much too much. So I have to kind of pare it down. And the way I do that is just by drawing a line drawing on whatever, you know, piece of paper, a canvas, whatever I'm doing, using the photograph as reference. And so what I wind up with is this line drawing, and you know, it's almost like after that, it's sort of a paint by numbers. You know, you know, I could just fill in the blanks. And one of the things that I've you know, even in school, when we were learning to draw, one of the favorite things was to produce works of art that were really just in line, like no shading, no color, but just a line drawing. And it's a very abstract way of making an image, because you're eliminating a huge amount of information. So in a way, it's sort of the same thing. Like I have this line drawing, I can then put away the picture and forget about the color that was in there. And then I start, you know, and so it's the color of the intervening spaces, and then the color of the lines, and then how they interact. And that's the thrill for me, and or the thing that drives me nuts. It's you know, because it doesn't always work. Some things you know, get out of hand, and so what happens is I wind up painting a whole series of paintings at the same time. Some of them, you know, none of them will be finished until, you know, I mean, I'll work on them simultaneously. So I can, right now I have 4 on the go, and so they're in different, 4 or 5 in different stages. So it kind of goes like that.
That's great. And what kind of materials, what kind of paints? Is it oil paint, or I know it somewhat looks like watercolor in the blend, but for the layman, what do you use?
So I primarily work in 3 different media. I do watercolors, I do oil paintings on panel. And, you know, there's a reason for that. I can explain that later. And then the other thing I do is acrylic paintings on canvas. And they all, you know, the 3 mediums have their idiosyncrasies. They look different. They behave differently, and they give a different result. And so in a way, it's almost like 3 different kind of veins of work that have, you know, similar things that have, you know, that they have in common. So for instance, the oil paintings on panel, they can be a little bit more, they can be a bit larger than a watercolor. I can kind of take my time a little bit with them more, because, you know, watercolor, you put it down, it dries right away. I mean, you can fuss around with it quite a bit, but it's oil painting, you know, if you really don't like something, you just scrape it back and try again. And watercolor doesn't work that way. Watercolor is beautiful. They usually wind up being smaller. They have to be framed. So there's certain things like that. The acrylic paintings can be a lot larger, and because acrylic paint remains flexible, and I kind of worry, I don't know why, but I worry about things, you know, being kind of archivally produced. That was part of my education. So I keep that in the back of my mind, and because it's very flexible, it works. You don't have to be careful about it on canvas. You just put it on, and it kind of has a lot in common with watercolor as well. You can, you know, acrylics are water soluble, so you can add a lot of water and put them on in thin layers and stuff like that. But so you know, people looking at my, you know, I suppose if you look behind me, that one there is acrylic on canvas. That's and the rest of them, I guess, are oil on panel. I don't have a watercolor to show you, but anyway, so 3 different mediums: watercolor, oil on panel, and acrylic on canvas. And all 3 of them have the same thing in common in a way that it's really just you know, it's a sort of a celebration of the possibilities of color, getting an aesthetic experience of looking at something in color.
Absolutely. Well, seeing that variety and talking about it, what would you consider to be your favorite art piece or your favorite medium to use? What has been your favorite avenue of work, if you will?
Well, I'm not sure, I remember somebody asking me if I had a favorite color, and that's like asking a writer if they have a favorite word or something like that. I don't know, maybe that's or a musician if they have a favorite chord, but they're all there, and there has to be an interaction between them, and that's what makes things go. So I guess a favorite painting, I don't know, I've had favorite paintings of my own. Certainly I have favorite paintings in history, everyone, I don't know if anyone knows about the Red Studio by Matisse. That's people could look that up, and if they don't know it already, that's a fantastic painting. And I was, when I was in college, I very much attracted to David Hockney, because his use of color was interesting, and also his subject matter at the time included a lot of gay young guys, and that was sort of an attraction for me. And he doesn't do that sort of stuff. In fact, he does he does landscape as I do now. So as an old man, he just became a landscape painter. And I go back in history. I was always attracted to the Impressionists. So Monet would be attractive to me. Van Gogh. I even made a list here, actually. Pierre Bonnard is a fantastic example of somebody who I can just, get lost in his stuff, and so there you go.
Right into the thick of it, how has COVID affected your process, your work, how you interact with the artistic community or not? Or as we were talking about earlier, it could have been a little bit easier for you because it gives you more of an option to see people or not?
One of the questions and the ideas that has to be kind of, when we're talking about COVID, is that it hasn't affected everyone equally at all. Exactly. And I work from home. I live in the country. My life really hasn't changed that much. I can get out of the house anytime I want, even under the complete lockdown. I can see people because I can go, we can walk outside. There's nothing wrong with that, nothing dangerous about that. So really, in a way, it's almost like I kept thinking to myself, I have to produce even more paintings because people will think I've wasted a perfectly good, pandemic. And you have to kind of, get going and do something. Now, having said that, I'm going hey, it hasn't been a problem for me, but then I know a few people in the restaurant business and, younger people. I have nephews, trying to go to school. It's been really hard for them. I mean, imagine, I have a nephew that went through CEGEP without actually going to CEGEP. The whole thing was on Zoom, So for me, though, I mean, it just means I have even more of an excuse or a chance or like a self-imposed obligation to just get into the studio every day. And I have a routine, so it hasn't really, it certainly hasn't, it's affected my art output. I've done more. So in that way, it's I guess been kind of a good thing.
Do you have a ritual of tasks that you do to prepare? How do you begin working? Do you have a little coffee, a little music, or something like that?
I got to say that starting is always a hard thing. One of my one of the things I've always done, I've always played music, and in the past 5 years or so, I completely changed from being sort of a chord playing guitarist to a classical, taking classical piano lessons. And so I come in and do do sort of finger exercises and sight reading exercises first thing in the morning, and that gets me into the studio because the piano's in here, and then once that's done, then I'm ready to start painting. So sometimes that actually works, but I gotta say it's always difficult to get going, but once I start painting, it's you wonder why what the problem was, because it's sort of painting and music in the way I practice, it's solitary, and it's very there's sort of an element of it's kind of like meditation. I would hesitate to say it really is meditation, but it's there's that aspect of it, emptying your mind and just going to a different place. It's either music or color and whatever, so that's that's what I look forward to when I get into the studio.
Mm-hmm. Just letting it flow out of you,
or making it flow out of me. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you can't wait around to be inspired. That's for
sure. How do you think either your industry or your personal art for yourself is going to evolve in the next few years?
Oh, listen. If anything's evolving for me, it's just slowly but surely the painting will change a little bit. Like last year, for instance. I mean, we were talking a little bit about Google Earth kind of paintings, from outer space in a way. And my brother-in-law bought himself a drone, and it's the first drone that came on the market that's light enough and small enough that you don't require a license. So I could just buy it and fly it. I didn't have to go and become qualified and register and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, hey, well, I'll do that, and it turns out that it produces pictures that I find very interesting and that I want to go out. So I go out and it's pushed everything. Like all the work I'm working on now is based on pictures that I took myself from a drone. So Google Earth is out and drone is back. So that's the kind of evolution that I would see happening. As far as an industry, I don't really see me being a participant in a big industry or anything like that.
With that technology boost, your work has changed and influenced how easily accessible some shots are. And in the industry, not being a participant, as you say, what would you recommend, or what would you suggest to new young artists trying to get into something a bit similar, or what would you recommend they don't listen to in terms of advice?
I'm not sure that I can give younger people advice. I mean, when I think about the art industry, in a sense, you hear about these paintings that go for millions of dollars, and you wonder about what happens to them after, and they wind up being stored away and never seen again often. Then there's this advent of the non-fungible token, which is basically, I think it means it's an artwork that you can download and look on your screen. I guess that's what it is, which to me is it's not. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I watch stuff on TV, which I suppose is not really TV. It's all the downloading services, the streaming services, and it's kind of a golden age for all of that stuff, because there's a lot of really good stuff. It's very entertaining. A lot of it is just entertaining silliness, but sometimes it can actually be high art, or at least art. And so I'm not against digital media that stream directly into our house. I participate in that, and I think it's actually a step forward. But one of the things I do oil paintings and watercolors and work on canvas, and part of it is really you're working with a medium that I can touch. And, you know, you know, if I'm working with paint nowadays, I choose only non-toxic pigments. You know, I try to, you know, when my paintings, when people are finally used, you know, they're finally sick of them, they'll biodegrade rather nicely, and they're not, they won't be poisonous. And you know, so I don't know, I'm kind of old fashioned in that way. So I don't know how many young people, unless they want to, you know, do this sort of retro thing and get into the old way of doing things. You know, I don't know if I have a whole lot of advice. The idea of technology, though, is I definitely use it to make the paintings. And you know, I just explained that I have a drone, which is something, you know, up until last year, I could never have had that. I suppose I could have had one maybe 5 years ago, but it would have cost more money, and I would have had to work at it a lot harder. But now you can just go out and buy one and fly it. You know, anybody can do it, and you can take pictures. And I've been using computers and digital photographs for years now. And you know, I edit photographs on Photoshop to kind of frame them the way I like. You know, crop them. I can enlarge. I can. Often I'll even completely blank out the cut. Like I'll just transform them into black and white images, so I'm not tempted to you know, to follow the colors that are there. I can just go into my own color scheme. So you know, I definitely use technology, but it doesn't really, the end product isn't really there. You know, it's the end product is something you can look at and hold in your hand, and really it's meant to hang in someone's house and for them to look at and contemplate, you know, and hopefully it's something that they like to look at every day.
Where could somebody procure your work or view your work? Anywhere on the web, anywhere in person?
Well, certainly my website is you know, peterraymond.ca. That's easy enough. This coming summer, I'll be participating in the Tour des Arts, which is sometime in July. I should know. I think it's the 16th to whatever of July, and it's 9 days. So people can come to visit me in my studio during that time, and other people as well. And I'm in Knowlton. And the other thing is that I have a gallery that I'm associated with in Montreal called Gallery Pink, or Pink Espace, I think it's called now. It's on Saint Jacques, between Guy and Mountain. And even if I'm not showing stuff, you know, it would be a fun place for people to go and take a look at whatever's going on at that particular time. It's a small gallery that's not affiliated to any big association or anything like that, and you know, it's meant to kind of showcase artists that kind of work outside the I guess the mainstream. You know, there's a bunch of, you know, kind of individual, lesser known, but sometimes, you know, people know about us, but
less of a cog in the machine and more of an expression.
Yeah. It's not really, you know, I mean, it's amazing because it's been around for over 30 years, and yet, and they don't. I don't think there've been too many grants. If they've ever been granted money from any of the governments, that hasn't been very often. And they still seem to be able to, you know, Pat Pink still seems to be able to hold together and have a lot of fun showing art. And you know, a lot of us are friends, but she's also welcomed new people, younger people, yeah, it's kind of a little community gallery. So that would be another place to go and look at. You know, you can, if you ask, she will show you a work of mine that's stuck in the back cupboard somewhere, and then every now and then I have a show there. Nothing scheduled right away, but could be something in the next year. You never know.
And finally, before we leave, is there anything else in particular that you'd like to share with us or with the audience? Anything particular about your work, about your methods, anything you'd like to share?
I don't know. I guess people ask and say, well, what's your artist statement, or what is your goal in being an artist and stuff like that. And I'm a landscape painter, and I think landscape is one of the great themes, along with being a portrait painter and still life and stuff like that. And I think a lot of painters in history that made money either painting portraits or it's a business for them. And when they wanted to kind of take it easy and just paint something for themselves, they often turn to the landscape, because it's sort of a painting that it's about nothing, and it's just about what's there in front of you, and you can paint that. And so there's not really any the content is really just color and design, and the excuse for all of that is a landscape, and now a landscape from a drone. So there you go.
It's great. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you to the audience for joining us. This has been another episode of Artist of the Week. You can find us at our website, our YouTube channel, and we will have Mr. Raymond's links down in the description. Have a nice day.